Welcome, everyone. My name is Ivana Wilson, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to our webinar, Why Most Capital Projects Fail Before They Begin and How the Stage Gate Process Helps. We're going to cover capital projects and stage gate system, which is a system that when it's used well, it can provide you with the confidence that you are executing the right projects in the right way. And when you do that, execution gets so much easier, smoother, with less rework, lower cost, and a bigger value in the end. So briefly about who we are. We are a boutique consulting company helping project leaders from renewables, oil and gas, and mining making better decisions with more confidence. We are on a mission to set up projects to win. And myself and my partner, we've got years of experiences, mainly in the oil and gas industry. I started in the UK in quality assurance, and then I moved into project governance, facilitation, and training. And it was actually in Australia when I worked for Woodside Energy that I learned the power of alignment, stage gate governance, as well as opportunity framing process. And my partner, Austin Wilson, has over 25 years of experiences, also initially in oil and gas, and then later on in large infrastructure projects, working in the UK, Australia, and right now in the USA. So we are on a mission in making sure projects are set up to win, and that's what we are tackling here today. So we are a team of trusted advisors, people located all around the world. Right now, we have teams in Houston, Melbourne, and Perth in Australia, and also in Thailand. So later today during the webinar, you will meet Akin Oni, Damodaran Raghu from Houston, and Neil Maxfield from Australia. So you get a chance to ask them any questions with regards to developing and managing capital projects and how they use stage gate process. And briefly about what Wilson Beast Consulting does, we are doing stage gate implementation, stage gate consulting, we facilitate workshops, and we provide training. So what's the roadmap for today? First of all, we're going to look at failure rates, why and where projects fail. And then we explore how stage gate process is different, what makes stage gate process different and really attractive, especially to capital projects. I'll share with you the key processes that drive success. And then I hand it over to our guest speakers, Akin, Raghu, and Neil, and they share with you incredible experiences they have from using stage gate process. And then there will be an exciting opportunity, something we've been working on for a while, and I'll share that at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please type in the chat box, and we'll also spend a dedicated time at the end of the webinar to address all of your questions about capital projects and the use of stage gate process. So, quick checking in. What industry are you in? Type in the chat. What industry are you in? How many of you are here from the oil and gas, renewables, or mining? So this webinar is designed specifically for those of you in the oil and gas, mining, and renewables. You might be someone new to governance process, or you might be someone experienced with capital projects and stage gate process. Whatever you add, this will be good for you. But if you are outside of these industries, buckle up, because the principles you will hear today apply anywhere big projects get developed. So those of you who are in the oil and gas, mining, or renewables, you know projects are how businesses grow. But here is the truth. most of them fail. So let me start with asking you this question. Type your answer in the chat. What percentage of capital projects do you think fail? Type your answer in the chat box. What percentage of capital projects do you think fail? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? I've got 60% or 75%. Look, every organization is different and every project is different. And doing projects, especially those meaningful, involve risk. And look, most organizations value different things, so the results they will get will vary. However, according to IPA, the independent project analysis, over 65% of large capital projects fail. So IPA, for those of you who don't know, it's an independent project analysis group that measures and collects information about project success and project failure for all energy and large infrastructure projects. So just think about it. Billions are lost every year in cost overruns, delays, and value delivery, which is nearly 2 out of 3 each time. So just to be specific, what do we mean when we talk about failure? So IPA says they define the failure if the project doesn't deliver on its objectives. For example, if schedule slips at least 25% of longer than planned, cost overruns 25% beyond estimate, or there is a value erosion, missed production targets, or under delivery on scope. So here is the thing. Failure doesn't always mean the project stops. Often it means billions are spent for less value than promised. And when it comes to failure, it's not just failure that hits the balance sheet. It's also the personal cost, which we don't talk about, the credibility, the impact on your career, team burnout, or even morale. And I know a lot of you have seen people walking away, even from the industry, because of the toll failed projects take on them. So you might want to ask, what about those successful projects? What about those remaining 35% of projects? So the statistics from IPA say that even successful projects often deliver only partial value. Oil and gas hits only 70% of production targets early on and 80% after 10 years. And when it comes to mining and renewables, the return on investment is much lower than promised and it takes much longer. So you have to ask, what does success really look like? So let's look at where projects struggle the most. Most problems only show up in execution. So this is when everyone can see them. Those issues with rework and redesign, for example, due to vague scope, missed financial or market window due to delay in decision making, and even team burnout and turnover when teams operate in a reactive mode, constantly dealing with changes. But here is the thing, those are not execution challenges. Those are the consequences of early missteps. So those are the project initiation or early stage challenges. Those are the challenges when we feel the pressure to deliver so much that we jump in with both feet without having a shared understanding about project objectives, success criteria, and project boundaries, where we allow stakeholders not to be aligned early on, which leads later on to resistance. When we don't identify risk early on or we downplay the impact of them. And when we identify assumption, but we don't verify those assumptions. So once you are in execution and you're dealing with those challenges, it's usually too late to fix them and still meet your project objectives. But look, even if you push through execution, you still pay the price in underperforming assets, issues with maintenance, issues with the environment, and poor return on investment. And that impacts your project reputation, your organizational reputation, and of course, your career. So here is the question. If most failures come from early stage challenges, they are not the execution challenges. Let me ask you this. How many of you are still spending most of the energy managing execution instead of setting up projects right in the first place? And look, seeing those challenges in project initiation, in execution, and in post execution, what do you think is missing most in your organization today? Is it clarity? Is it alignment? Is it governance? Or maybe something else? Type in the chat. What is missing the most? Let's talk about what is stage gate process. So look, stage gate process is not just another project management buzzword. It's been around for decades. It was initially invented by Dr. Robert Cooper in product development and later on adopted for large capital projects. And it's a structured framework designed to reduce uncertainty and risk in complex projects. And what you see on the slide, it's the way it works. So what do? You take the project and you divide this into stages and gates. So you typically do work during the stage, and then instead of rushing forward, we pause at defined gates to check in. Are we still aligned? Are we ready? And do we want to move forward? And this way, every key decision is intentional, not accidental. So, quick checking in. Tell me your experiences with stage gate. Type in a chat. Is it none? Is it some? Or is it lots? What's your experience with stage gate? Is it none? Is it some? Or is it lots? That's great. We do have some experience people in stage gate. That's absolutely fantastic. And I see a comment from Mohammed early on. What's missing in the organization is stakeholders alignment. And bear with me in a moment. We're going to talk more about how stage gate can provide you with the access to early stakeholders alignment. So we do have a range of experiences, which is great. So this is the framework that we typically teach our clients. So what you see is the 5 stages, 4 gates framework. The first stage, the assess stage, this is when we identify and explore the project. The concept stage, when we identify a wide range of solutions, and at the end of this stage, we pick one that fits the best. In develop stage, we develop that solution and we prepare for execution. In execution stage, we execute, implement, and we make it happen. And in the last stage, we bring the project to a new environment. We bring the change to a new place. So here is the thing. Not every project deserves the same stage gate journey. So the process begins after the project is screened and it looks promising. And before gate 1, after you do initial scaling and categorization, you conduct framing, which is the fundamental to achieve decision maker and project team alignment on what are you actually trying to achieve. And framing will dictate the amount of activities, deliverables, assurance required, and even project team competencies that need to be in place to move to the next gate. And then at each gate, decision makers, the sponsor, the project team will get together in order to review, is this project still worth pursuing? Where is the value going to come from? Are we ready? Do we have an alignment? And then they decide whether we continue or not. So those of you who are new to this framework, think of those gates as decision checkpoints. They're not just box ticking exercise. This is where you make conscious decisions whether you're going to move forward, invest money or not. So it's an opportunity for a structured conversation. So look at this framework and think about which phase do you think most of your projects spend too little time in. Type in the chat, which phase do you think projects tend to be rushed? They don't spend enough time in. Assess and concept, assess. That's right. This is that moment when you build your initial value proposition, when you verify the strategic fit between the opportunity of the project and your organizational strategy. And this is when you create your roadmap and you dictate how the project is going to move from one phase to the next. So let's talk about when do we actually create value and when do we actually maintain the value. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the stage gate process, please pay attention to that distinction because this is the key distinction in the stage gate process. So in the next slide, we're going to move into a data again from IPA, Independent Project Analysis Group. So what you see on the slide is that FEL front-end loading, which is the work that you do during the first three stages, the assess, the concept, and develop stage. This is the single biggest predictor of project success. So the better you define your project before the execution starts, the higher your chance to deliver on time and on budget. So if you look at this blue line and the green line, and I want you to think about the blue line is project A and a green line is project C, you see that those projects that spend time with good definition, even with poor project execution, they tend to deliver higher quality outcomes than those projects like the green project that rush through the stages and gates. And even with good project execution, they tend to deliver lower outcomes at the end. So front-end loading is the practice of taking sufficient time to really understand the opportunity, understand the risk, the uncertainties, making sure that you sufficiently develop your solution before you sanction the project, before you move into execution and commit to major expenditure. So this is the focus of stage gate process, making sure that the journey from assess, concept, and develop up into execution is well defined. So what you look as well is the first three stages. This is where you create the value. Once you move to execution, you focus on protecting and maintaining the value. You don't create the value. I believe a lot of people over assess and don't do. Okay, that's an interesting. So that's what you need to determine during the framing process. What would be the best fit considering the stage gate process principles, the value proposition of your project, the project category, the cost, the complexity, and the risks involved. What would be the best fit for the roadmap? And you determine this during the opportunity framing workshop, which is at the start of the assess and tend to be at the start of the concept. From my almost 20 years of experiences working with capital projects with different clients on different continents, I see that most organizations who have stage gate process in place make a lot of mistakes. And maybe because of those mistakes they made, the system for many seems complicated and sometimes tend to be abused. So, the typical mistakes that we see when we work with our clients is the gates tend to be too rigid. There is no understanding or application of scalability principles. There is a climate of checkbox assurance, gut decisions. So there is no process to verify assumptions during the stage as well as at the gate. And there tend to be no ownership and no training in place. So those mistakes have an impact, such as the bureaucracy that slow things down, the misalignment between decision makers and project teams, the hidden risk, the decisions that lack accountability, and ultimately projects end up failing for reasons that could have been prevented. So look, those mistakes cost billions of dollars every year. And most of the time, they cost lost opportunities or they cost the companies developing the wrong projects at the wrong time or projects with wrong solutions. So, for those of you who are familiar with the stage gate process, I want you to look at those mistakes and impact. Which of those are you familiar the most? Type in the chat. Which of those mistakes, which of those impacts are you familiar the most? All of the above. Okay. No roles, no ownership. So, for those of you who are working in stage gate process, there is a better way. And when we work with our clients, either implementing stage gate process or consulting on stage gate process, these are some of the things that we want to make sure our clients are able to define and implement. So, categorization and scalability principles, defining the role of decision review board, understanding and knowing how to apply opportunity framing workshops, understanding and knowing how to create a governance with assurance and risk in mind, understanding and knowing how to validate assumptions, defining clarity, defining clearly roles at each gate for each type of the projects, understanding and knowing how to capture and apply lessons learned, understanding and knowing how to provide a company-wide training and access to expert support. And I see more answers: confusion on accountability, lost knowledge, that's right, risk being downplayed, roles, and ownership. So for those of you who are not familiar with the stage gate, my question to you is, think about your last project, and did you feel the biggest challenge was at the start, during the execution, or post execution? Type in the chat. That's just another way to help you make that distinction between challenges that relate to the project start, challenges that relate to execution, which again are direct consequences of poor project startup. The last project was not accepted by the end user, thank you, and no training across the company. And then at the start, insufficient company project staff. This happens throughout the project life cycle. So by now, we know that most capital projects fail not in execution, but before execution begins. So stage gate process really forces decision makers and their teams to slow down at the beginning, build clarity, get everyone aligned before pouring in resources. And this is what gives leaders the confidence that when they say yes to a project, they are backing something they truly believe in. And this is how you prevent wasted resources. This is how you cause project success rates to go up. And this is how you get your projects faster with lower cost. And this is how you save millions by killing bad projects early on. We often get questions, especially from our PMI community. What is stage gate process? Is this a waterfall hybrid? What it is? What are the differences between stage gate process and other approaches? So here is what I want you to know. The PMI life cycle, it's a great process that gives structure and discipline, but it really doesn't question whether the scope is right. It assumes that you've already got the right project and the right scope. And this is a big assumption. So PMI lifecycle is heavily focusing on getting the project done fast. It's all about how do you execute your project. Whereas waterfall is more linear and sequential, and it assumes the requirements are fixed from the start and you don't need to go back to revisit early decisions. And it also assumes that you are dealing with the right project and the right scope. And Agile thrives in dynamic environment where scope evolves and you allow customers to contribute to your scope as you develop your project. But Agile also assumes that we are building the right thing from the beginning, just in small increments. So this is where stage gate process is different. It doesn't assume we already know the answer. It's about building the governance checkpoints to test whether the project is worth pursuing, whether assumptions are valid, whether the team and decision makers are aligned, and whether this is the right project for our company. And this is what you need to do before you commit to major expenditure, before you move into execution. So that's why StageGate complements project PMI lifecycle. It complements Waterfall. It complements Agile by bringing the governance structure. It does not replace any of those. So, which approach is dominant in your organization today? Is it more PMI life cycle? Is it more waterfall, agile stage gate, or something else? Drop it in the chat. Some of you say stage gate, agile, waterfall. So I want you to remember that distinction. Stage gate, it is not to replace waterfall or agile. It's to provide the governance and complement waterfall, agile, or a traditional PMI life cycle. If you only take away one idea from this webinar about stage gate process, let it be the opportunity framing workshop. This is what dictates how you're going to scale and what's the minimum amount of work that you will do in each phase to take the project to your next gate. Framing really replaces months of chasing alignment and clarity seeking into 2 days workshop. It helps you to define the problem, align stakeholders on the current state, the future state, understand your assumptions, options, stakeholders, and ultimately build a project-specific roadmap with clear deliverables, assurance, and actions. So for those of you who are ready to go deeper and want to become leaders in capital projects, we have built a training program where you can learn the foundations about the stage gate process, the key processes within the stage gate process, and the entire opportunity framing workshop process. This is for those of you who seek clarity on how to create and how to prepare FID ready projects. This is for those of you in decision making roles. So you might be an executive, a sponsor, a gatekeeper, or assurance or risk lead. You might be someone who is managing projects in early stages, or a project manager, project engineer, or even an owner representative. Or you might be a consultant, trainer, or an EPC contractor. This is for everyone who wants to understand the foundation about stage gate processes within the governance, the assurance, the risk. And if that's something that interests you, at the end of this webinar, we've got a special launch offer. So stay with me at the end. And now let me invite, in a moment, I want to now introduce our guest speakers and give them opportunity to share a little bit about some of the projects they were involved, some of the challenges they encountered, and how StageGate, or maybe some of the principles from StageGate, they've used with their clients or their project. So let's welcome Akin Oni, the project executive, leader, and author with an extensive global experiences in project management, project controls, contracts and procurement, governance, framing, assurance in real diverse industries covering mining, oil and gas, renewables, and also large infrastructure projects. He has extensive experiences with BHP Cheniere, currently consulting and writing books. So let's welcome Akin. Akin, please tell anything else that I missed and share with us, well, what were some of the challenges that you had with your project?
Thank you very much, Ivona, and good day, everyone. As you heard, my name is Akin Oni, and my background is mechanical engineering and project management. I've been privileged to have worked in different cultural environments, either to deliver projects or to independently peer review projects across 6 continents, except Antarctica as of this morning. It's interesting that we have this platform, and thank you so much, Ivona and Austin, for creating this platform for us to share our views. I could share a lot of views, but time will not permit me. I'm just going to share one perspective with you all today, which is more around bridging the boardroom to the job site. Those of you who are very familiar with my LinkedIn posts in recent times, you must have heard me say this. The gap between boardroom vision and field level execution is where value is often lost or unlocked. And I really like some of the comments that I've read here. Like one of my former colleagues noted that one of the challenges we face in the workplace is willingness to take time to plan well. Yes, as you all know, failure to plan is plan to fail. And I will tell you this. A few years ago, I was asked to advise on a multi-billion-dollar deepwater development that was veering dangerously off course. Schedule trust had evaporated, cost was ballooning, and leadership was losing clarity. What did we find? It wasn't execution that failed. It was the front end that they never fully understood. The project had bypassed early stage framing, rushed FEL1, and treated gate reviews as box checks. When we were brought on, the first thing we did was to try to listen, learn, and thereafter we reintroduced a discipline stage gate structure, reframed the business case, clarified value drivers, and brought in third-party assurance with it, not just templates. 6 months later, here's the good news. Confidence was rebuilt. The investment decision was sound and execution found solid footing. Let me wrap this up by saying this. Joining this learning community has been a game changer for me in my career. And as someone who has led capital programs on 6 continents, I can tell you these frameworks that you've had us talk about are not theory. They are how to stay employed. I only wish this kind of structured learning had existed 20, 30 years ago. Thank you very much. Back to you, Ivona.
Thank you so much, Akin. And that was a great example. I did not share yet much about the community that we're building. So, which is great. We're going to do it very soon. I have one question for you, Akin, because you have worked on StageGate for so long. And I remember you sharing with me the times when you worked for BHP and you travel with them all around the world. And you were even the one building the governance process. I think it was down in Australia. So tell me, what was the biggest challenge, if you can recall the time when you were working on bringing the governance process in Australia? What was the biggest challenge?
Thank you very much, Ivona. One key challenge then I can easily recall was around people. And when I talk about people, it's a very broad topic. Stakeholders on one hand, what I call the OPMT, Owners Project Management Team on the other, and then the third pillar there, where we had some struggles, was finding the right contractor with good skill sets. And at the end of it all, the company I worked for then, there was no shortage of processes and procedures. And before I joined that team, the team had actually been successful, quote and unquote, without fully utilizing all the governance frameworks in place. Then we find ourselves developing $1 billion investment in the middle of resource constraints environment, where we didn't have all the people that we needed to be able to do what we needed to do within a given time period. But at the end of the day, we got corporate support around what we were supposed to be delivering, and whether through supporting us with resources, supporting us with ideas, we were able to bring everyone together such that we could progress that work. But it was very challenging initially, aligning the stakeholders, making sure the OPMT, the Owners Project Management Team members, the members were aligned, and making sure we even had the right EPC resources to deliver what we were envisioning. So it was really challenging, but we did what we had to do. But again, not without going back to redo what we could have done in the first place through framing. And then we used to do what we call opportunity framing on one hand, and then case framing on the other hand. Particularly once you decide on an opportunity, then you frame the different cases within the context of that one opportunity. But overall, it was a success. But it started out with some pains. Back to you.
Okay, thank you so much. So what I hear you saying, it's really the support from the leadership team that you had in order to bring the governance structure even to well-performing assets, projects, or teams. Thank you, Akin. And let's welcome Damodaran Raghu. Raghu, we've met recently. What a pleasure to meet you as well. Past general manager for all major projects and assets and technical authority for Shell in the past. And currently, you are managing partner at Kaleidoscope Energy, focusing on helping clients with front-end loading, doing owners engineering work, value engineering, strategy development, and consulting. So, Raghu, please add anything else that I missed, and tell us a little bit more about this value engineering. What is value engineering, and how does this fit with the stage gate process?
So a bit of background before I get into value engineering. See, my experience is about 35 years. I'm actually a metallurgical engineer by training, and a majority of my time was spent in Shell in various functions. I was doing upstream, midstream, downstream, LNG. I've done discipline engineering, management, project engineering, research and development, engineering, and technical support, the whole 9 yards. So reason I say this is when I get into projects, it is important to bring in all these different perspectives for project success. And so when it comes to value engineering, you mentioned value engineering. I'll come to the benefits of value engineering in a little later. Many of these things are contingent on making sure that you have a very robust stage gate process where front-end loading is done in a very disciplined manner. It's actually mission critical. If you don't do it right, you could, we talk about project failures and project success. You may have a mechanical completion, but if you don't do some of these things right up front, your success is really not success. So having said that, I see 3 areas where stage gate process is very impactful, and value engineering falls into all of that analysis. Three areas are, in my opinion, one is improves your capital efficiency, which means you have, at the end of the day, your project has to be cost effective, it has to be risk managed, and it has to have value engineered solutions. When you say value engineered solutions, when you look at the project, you have to make sure that the right concepts are selected. You also have the right engineering and technology and other aspects built into it so that you can, like Ken talked about, unlock the most value out of a project. Most times, you don't spend enough time doing that value engineering aspect to make sure that the complete value is unlocked in a project. So the first part of having a stage gate process is to, the benefit is, or the impact is to have increased capital efficiency. And so in preparation for this, I looked up some data. Typically, if you have good capital efficiency, which is through a good front-end loading process or a stage gate process, your total installed cost can typically be reduced by 10 to 20%. So for a $10 billion project, that's a lot of money. The second part is what I would call engineering efficiency, because most of the time when we design projects, we have to define the requirements of the project. And the requirements also fall into value engineering. Many times you tend to gold plate projects. We tend to over specify things. I think one of the audiences actually mentioned that, you tend to over specify things. All these add cost to it. Then you have all these different interfaces that you have to define so that different disciplines, different groups work in harmony with each other. And then you have to also have right roles and responsibilities. So once your stage gate process allows you to actually frame all of this in a very proper fashion so that you can significantly reduce your engineering hours. This is actually quite telling because in some projects we've seen up to 40% reduction in engineering hours by having a good front-end stage gate process. So last thing I see in terms of the impact, again, goes back to concept of value engineering is on the safety side. We talk a lot about safety, but most of the times we don't actually look at safety in terms of cost, but it has a significant cost. And so having a stage gate process with good front-end loading enables you to have safety built into your design. You have constructability, things like maintainability, commissioning and startup, all that built into your design so that those are incorporated upfront. So that, see, once you cut steel, then you can any kind of change will cost you an arm and a leg. So you have to do all of these upfront. So when you talk of value engineering, you're actually looking at all these three areas and trying to optimize that. So it's not all, when you say value engineering, it is basically not always engineering. It can be personnel, it can be leadership, it can be technology, it can be engineering, a whole 9 yards. But the engineering is more used as a term, a verb, rather than engineering as a subject. So with that, if I can, I'd like to give an example of one of the, I would say, most impactful projects I've worked in Shell in my whole career. And it was probably one of the most exciting times of my 35-year career. I don't know whether there are folks in Shell in this group. I think I saw Ife, one name, which is from Shell. But Shell had this, Shell was developing this ultra deepwater project called Appomattox in Gulf of Mexico. And Appomattox was often defined as the energy project that defied all odds, because it had numerous challenges, technology challenges, commercial challenges, engineering challenges. And so as you developed a project, you also had to develop technology, you had to qualify technology, you had to make it commercial and apply it to the project. That requirement was there for the project to have the right kind of NPV, or net present value, which would then make sure that the FID is passed. So it is something very attractive, because you had to develop the R&D process along with your project process using a stage gate or a front-end loading methodology. Ken alluded to that. One of the key advantages we had there was we had very forward-thinking leadership. They actually saw the need for this to be there, and so they implemented a very robust, fit-for-purpose stage gate process. And lo and behold, we came out with a stellar NPV. We came out, we had a very disciplined stage gate process. And today, Appomattox is producing oil, and they're adding additional tiebacks. So it is, for me, it is a great example of what can happen if you have the right kind of leadership and the right kind of process both in place. And it was all done, it was all achieved only because we had a very robust, disciplined stage gate front-end loading process.
Okay.
So
This
thank you.
is great. I've actually got a few questions myself, but let's just look at questions from our audience first. And I'm not sure whether also Akin and Neil, you can also jump in and address this question. This is interesting questions from Aoife. I'm looking at question from Aoife. In your experience, have you seen a case when the front-end loading was robust, but the project still experienced some inefficiencies? If so, what did you identify as the root cause? What would be your recommendation to mitigate that issue? So, Raghu, do you want to look at that question?
Actually, I can answer that, because we just since I left Shell and started consulting, this was one of the areas that we encounter all the time. And reason is when people talk about a front-end process, a front-end loading process, and a stage gate process, people don't have most of them don't have a clear idea of what is success at each stage. So they tend to bypass, go from stage to stage without doing the right things that need to be done at each stage. So you walk away thinking that you have a very robust FEL process, in reality, you don't. But the good thing is, this is, I didn't mention that. The good thing is now there are processes like the PDRI process that actually helps you to do that. So it's not no guesswork anymore. You can actually go to a particular stage and look at it. You can define the requirements, and there are benchmarks that will allow you to say, okay, am I that threshold that I can go to the next stage or not? So to answer your question, yes, most of the time, this inefficiencies stem from the fact that folks don't, they go through FEL, they think they've gone through FEL, but in reality, they haven't gone through the complete process. But then if you use all these PDRI type of processes, you can address that very efficiently. Does that help?
Yes, so that was really great. So just to reiterate what I heard you said, it's that's at the start of the process in the assess phase. We identify gate requirements and we might use what we call PDRI, and get ready, Raghu, to explain what is PDRI, because we talked about this. Or your company might identify their own requirements, which is a combination of organizational requirements, considering the context of the project and maybe team capabilities as well. And I also see that Neil and Akin are jumping in. So make sure you can also relate to some of those questions if there is something else that you would like to add. So we get the second question for Neil, because I think he might be talking about stakeholders. Yes, so just briefly, Raghu, before you go, clarify what is a PDRI?
PDRI stands for Project Development. I forget what R stands
Rating
for.
index, yeah?
Rating index.
Yeah.
Rating index. So basically, to put it very simplistically, it's a accepted form of evaluating stage gates, wherein you have different categories of completions, and you ask yourself certain questions, and every question has a certain score. So there you compile the score, and that score determines whether you have the threshold to go to the next stage or not. If any of you are interested, feel free to just ping me on LinkedIn, and I'll be. We can have this separate, because it's not. I can't explain this in one sentence, but bottom line is, takes a lot of guesswork out of the process. It's very robust in terms of asking certain very discrete questions that will allow you to go to the next stage once you meet certain requirements.
We probably have a standalone webinar on PDRI just for those of you who are looking to introduce this for your company. We do have a question from Mohammed, and it's a question, but I think probably all of you might look at that. And excellent tool for assessment. That's right. So Mohammed's question is: in what ways can public opinion and community engagement as external stakeholders influence the success of a project during its early development stages? Additionally, what strategies might be employed to proactively mitigate such risk, particularly in light of projects like Keystone XL Pipeline, which failed to secure public approval? So I will touch on that one later on, but Raghu, if that's something you want to add about stakeholders' engagement and the impact on project success.
No, again, I would, Neil or Akin, please jump in. But the stakeholders' engagement is something that you have to do way upfront, because there's no if you don't get that, then rest of the work you do is kind of mute. So you really have to make sure that is done upfront. And so when I started off with Shell, I was working for the pipeline group, and that was something that was drilled into us, that look, stakeholder engagement, stakeholder acceptance is key, because in Shell, like most of the companies, we use a term called license to operate. And the license to operate comes from various factors. And one of the key aspects of the license to operate is from your stakeholders. So yes, it has to be done really upfront. So I don't know about the Keystone pipeline, at what stage some of these engagements were made. I know about the pipeline project itself, but I don't know the details. So Mohammed, probably you can fill in whether early engagement was something that was done or it wasn't. It was something that was missed.
Okay, that's great. We're going to extend the webinar for a little bit longer because we really want to welcome also Neil Maxfield from Melbourne, Australia. I know it's very late for you, Neil. Thank you so much for coming to the webinar. And Neil Maxfield is actually my previous manager from my time in Australia at Woodside Energy. He's got extensive global leadership experience, not just in Australia, but also in America. He's a past general manager involved in Stagegate refurbishment back in old days at Woodside, and obviously project development and project management. Currently consulting for many companies, including software and also oil and gas and mining companies in Australia and both Americas. Neil, please add anything else I may be missed. And especially I would love you to cover about the value creation in the front end loading, and if you could give a bit of advice on companies that already have some stage gate process and maybe they're going for improvement, what is some of the things that should be watching out for?
Thank you, Ivana. The stage gate process is simply a framework, an architecture that allows us to govern a journey from the idea through to the completed opportunity, creating value for the business. And if we focus on the value that we envisage, we can sometimes be so focused that we think that whatever we do will realize that value. Historically, across many industries, and certainly my lived experience, is that we only create that value at the end when we start with an open mind as to how we might realize that value. And that's where the stage gate process really comes to the fore, is that we step incrementally with the knowledge we have around the idea, around the value that we're trying to achieve or realize. And we do just enough work to understand it as we move through each of the stages and make decisions such that when we make a decision, the executive who are responsible to put that capital to good use and deliver value through that capital are able to see that, yes, we can understand how this will see a life cycle, a path through to value. I was involved in a complex Australian mega project where we redeveloped a gas gathering facility mid-reservoir life. And we applied a fit-for-purpose application, stage gate process. It was a fairly complex project, so it was the full process. We didn't have to scale it back, which you would do for a smaller opportunity. And we sanctioned that project with a robust understanding of particularly the stakeholders involved and the risks and opportunities that were in front of us. And that's what we understood. And going to the question from Marvin, we understood the stakeholders in the initial framing, and then with subsequent reframing, we re-looked at those stakeholders and understood just how they would impact and their influence. And we're able to spend time early engaging them and bring them on the journey. So we weren't coming in later and saying to them, we're going to do something to you or with you once we've already made the decision. We were doing that from the very start and engaging them early because we understood the need to engage them and have them take the journey with us, to have some skin in the game. And whilst we're thinking about those stakeholders and understanding them, we're spending time on the strategic and tactical risks that sit around those stakeholders and non-stakeholder risks and opportunities as well. And and doing the work to actually give ourselves confidence around those risks and opportunities. And by doing that, we ended up taking an extra year in the front end to actually get all the stakeholders aligned, everything right, reduced risk to a residual level that the executive could handle. And then when we made that decision, we were able to deliver on the promise. And we had all sorts of almost black swan events, those low probability, high consequence risks actually realised because we'd thought about them early, because we'd had that real focus in the concept definition and develop phases particularly. We were able to then roll with those things, manage them, be in front of them, and maintain the value that we had created at the start. And fundamentally, that project stands out to me as the one where the stage gate process saved that project from being one of the classic failures, because the time was taken up front to understand the stakeholders, understand the risks and opportunities, understand that change would occur, and plan, do scenario planning, be ready, make sure the right contingencies and allowances were in place, the right resources were available, and execute in front of the issues and the change that naturally occurs on any project, because they'd been thought through and planned at the start. The project team there had a solid foundation to deliver from. They were able to be in front of emerging risks, and they were ready to take opportunities as they presented. And success came from that. The extra year that was taken in the front end, that could have easily 2-3 years at the back end. And so for me, the stage gate process helps us to take time at the start to understand, to have clarity, to actually allow ourselves to be in front of and deliver confidently to the promise that we make to the executive, to the shareholders, and more broadly. I think I should reiterate the stage gate process drives the creation of value. From the initial framing of the project idea, then we build maturity and clarity during each of the subsequent stages, such that the executive make informed decisions at each stage gate. And then application of the stage gate process in a way that's scaled and to suit any project complexity. From a simple project, we might reduce the number of stages and gates through to one where we actually take significant amounts of time, even up to a year in a single stage. That if we do that well, and we take the time to really understand it as a owner and the team are clearly invested in and understand the value of, we can change the legacy of projects that have not met promise at sanction to one delivered on promise, delivered as promise, continuously delivered as promise. And for me, that's the reason why I'm so passionate about the stage gate process and spending my semi-retirement in supporting companies to either refresh or reinvigorate or implement the stage gate process.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Neil. If you got any questions, please, this is a good time to jump in and ask a question, either for Neil, Akin, or Raghu, or just generic questions, and then we'll just work it out who would like to answer. It's an interesting time, Neil. We got to do some work together on implementing stage gate process last year. And from your experiences, Neil, what are some of the things that we can help them to stay excited throughout the process?
Ivona, let's think about projects and break it apart. There's engineering, there's various activities that need to be done. The PMI lifecycle, for example, as you mentioned earlier, has some really good guidance on the things you need to focus on to make sure that you can deliver. One of the things that stands out time and again is people and culture and leadership. if the top of the organization, if the executive let the organization know that having an appropriate process, scaled, fit for purpose, for the complexity, for the job at hand, and the business actively owns and supports the processes that come together, the business processes that come together, that are used within the stages as you move the opportunity forward, then we see the changes and the uptake through the organisation embed and move rapidly. More often than not, though, where we don't have that top-down alignment, we don't have clarity across the business of the business processes and the ownership of those processes, and the ability to share best practice through subject matter expert network and consultant support or expert advice support as needed, then you can spend 1, 2, 3 years through the refresh or for the update, but not actually realise the value because you haven't been able to bring together, or the organisation hasn't been able to bring together everyone to say, this is the way we work around here, this is how we do things, this is our way. And we don't blindly follow the process. We're not process driven to the extent where we process at all costs. We're not so compliance driven that we actually tie ourselves in knots. We use the stage gate process to allow us a foundation to run at the right pace and that's needed for that particular opportunity in that location, based on the needs of the stakeholders, based on the needs of the various parts of the organisation to support the project, based on the abilities and competencies of contractors to deliver for a project. We take the time to understand early in framing, and I keep coming back to it. You mentioned earlier, if we take one thing away, I'm taking framing away today, and I'll continue to take framing away. Focus at the start to understand the environment, the landscape, move forward.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much, Neil. We got a little bit over time, but this is great. I think it was so good to hear from all of you today. Mohammed, just to add to your question, there are in all of our experiences, there were situations like you described where stakeholders were missed. They happen to be valuable stakeholders that even cause the project to stop. And I think that's a really good lesson. And you ask about the mitigation things that could actually prevent that from happening. And this is really what everyone says the same, which is to conduct opportunity framing workshops early in the assess and probably again in a concept phase, because this is when you begin to map out your stakeholders and understand their issues, their drivers, their concerns. And this is the basis for you to create a robust stakeholders management plan. And the same we see happening in renewables, where location can make or break the project. And there is a lot more emphasis to understand what community actually wants, and then build this as an input into the concept. Framing will help you to tell the story, tell how the story is going to expand, and really initially align on what is actually the value proposition. What are we actually going to tell when we go outside of our company? What is this project about? What is the value that creates? What options we're looking at? Anyway, I'm not sure if I answered fully your questions. Feel free to reach out to us. I hope I did answer. Thank you so much. What I also want to do before you all disappear, I do want to bring back my slide deck again and show you the unique opportunity that we have, which is to provide the project executives, project managers, project lead with an opportunity for education, live discussion, mentorship when they need it most. So we have an offer on our website for access to education only, education and experts, or enterprise solution, which is fully customized approach. We've built a program which is totally affordable for everyone. The offer is that we give 12 months access to fundamentals about stage gate process. Only during our launch, which is today, we offer 4 monthly live teaching calls starting next Thursday, September the 4th at 10 a.m. CDT. Inside the course, you will find worksheets, activities, case studies to really help you understand what it's like, what it takes to break down a project into stage gate process, how to set up governance from the start, how to plan and conduct assurance activities, how risk can help with creating a robust governance, and we're going to give you the entire process to plan and conduct opportunity framing workshop. We also give you access to discussion forum. It's a course certificate with course assessment as well, and an option to upgrade for community hub. With the access of community, this is best offer for those of you who are sponsors, executives, gatekeepers, assurance leads, risk managers. You have access to consults 101 with our experts, monthly expert session, and also weekly office hours when you can just show up with your questions. And the enterprise solution will provide you with private and secure space for your team only. So this is the offer that we have. I'm going to send you in the chat a link to our landing page. Special webinar offer is to give you extra $200, which is really bargain. The whole course will cost you $299 with the promo code DGP0825. This is the only offer for 5 days available. I won't make this offer anymore. And after our launch, which is gonna end mid-September, the price for training package only per person is $997. Anyway, this is something that interests you. Thank you so much for showing up. If there are any other questions that you have, either about the program or question to our experts, this is a good time. Type your question in the chat. Is this package include template and tools to use in projects? Yes, so the offer includes templates, worksheets, and exercise that you will use to help you understand how stage gate process works. They may not necessarily be copy and paste for your project, but you will have, for example, one of the most valuable guide that we have is template for gate questions for each gate. And this is in Excel spreadsheet. So all of your templates, all of your guides, you can download and use straight away. So this is probably a really good starting point. So you will also see that we are giving you 14 days money back guarantee. This is how confident we are that this is a unique package for those who are serious about learning how stage gate process works and how to apply opportunity framing workshops, how to set up gates, how to conduct decision gate review, what could be the requirements for each gate, how could you scale, and with a basic discussion forum at the basic level, and then the advanced option, which tends to be a better offer for executives, for decision makers. No data from our projects will be stored in our system, right? As our company doesn't allow that. That's right. So if your option, if you have more than 3 or 4 people from your team that would like to take up this offer, let me know, because you might be eligible for enterprise solution only, where we will create a secure folder where you can ask questions and no one else can see them. And if you want to book a tour, just to look around the platform and check with your IT requirements, please contact us. Send me a quick email to book a tour, and we can talk in details to make sure we meet our requirements. So this is this offer that you have, $299. It's only valid until Monday, next Monday. After Monday, the price goes into $499, and from mid-September, we charge about $1,000 a person for 12 months. So it's very, very affordable. We're launching something new. Just so you know, we're getting incredible feedback. PMI is looking to adopt and help us promote this because they really see this as an opportunity to bring governance to regular traditional project planning as well as agile projects. So if you have any questions, please contact me by email. Let's make sure that we do our next big projects with more power, more alignment, less cost, faster, and bigger value at the end. So thank you for those of you who came on board. It's been such a pleasure to have you all. We absolutely enjoyed being with you. So enjoy the rest of the week. And I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Thank you. The webinar is over.